Good afternoon. Thanks, everybody, for showing up here. We have a very interactive session here, given the audience. I'm Mike Vertal, CEO of Rivet Logic, and with me here is Steve Ceplenski from Hightail. For those of you that don't know me and us, Rivet Logic's a platinum-level services provider of Alfresco and other technology. And about a year and a half ago, Steve came to us looking for a new web content management platform for their fast-growing technology business. And they were at the time looking at Adobe CQ5, but we're looking for something that was a little bit more open and more cost-effective, and settled on a Crafter Alfresco solution that we helped them implement. So I just want to thank Steve for giving us the story today about the project.
No worries. This reminds me of off Broadway plays when 4 people would show up on a Saturday night and you still had to give the show of your life. So my name is Steve Ceplenski. I'm from Hightail, which is formerly Usendit. I run currently the big data engineering team there, but a year and a half ago I ran web strategy. And I was brought in primarily to help the company do a couple things: rebrand, build a brand new website on top of some tools that we didn't yet have, separate content management from engineering, and help us launch internationally. And essentially, I was brought in to take care of the infrastructure and the tools that would be used to do that. So what I'm talking about today is a little bit about Hightail, just a couple minutes. If you're familiar with Usendit, then you know what Hightail is. A little bit about the challenges we had at the time. So this was a year and a half ago, and this was in preparation for choosing both the content management vendor and the web content management vendor. Of course, we picked Alfresco and Rivet Logic. I wouldn't be standing here. I'd be at an Adobe conference. And talk about a little bit of the success, show you some quick screenshots of what we put together, and then some lessons learned. Start off, I threw some random quotes. Some of them are funny, some are not in here. My first was "content is king," which has nothing to do with the second quote. It's something that you hear a lot. But at Hightail, we kind of are humbled by the content that is sent on our system. We get caught up in the features and the function, the little nuances of what our product can do. But when you actually listen to some customer support calls and you realize we've got large media organizations sending Olympic files, we've got people sending wedding albums, we've got architecture firms sending huge documents for buildings, we have people sending their life, their month, their week's work creation. And we sometimes forget that it's the content that has the value, and we're just a mechanism to store it and version it and send it. The second one is just a quote I like: "Be yourself, everybody else is taken." We used to say at IBM, unique value proposition. Great, propositions are always interesting, value is always nice, but it's the uniqueness that matters. When we looked for a vendor, when we looked for partners, we realized that we didn't want to change the things that were unique about us, and we didn't want to follow the leader. We wanted to choose a vendor that had those same uniquenesses. Quick about Hightail. Formerly Usendit, we got to keep saying this for 6 months. Doesn't roll. Hightail, formerly Usendit. Our mantra: easiest way to securely send, share, and access business content from anywhere. You may say, "Hey, I heard this today somewhere at another Alfresco session," but we really focus on the delivery of large files. And although people may use it to send a photo or a music file, we typically see 100 megabyte plus files into the multi-gigabyte files being sent on our system. 8 years young, you wouldn't call an 8-year-old old, so I won't say old. We have 43 million registered users, 98% of the Fortune 500. And our core is what we call our 4 S's: send, share, sync, and sign. If you think about this kind of from a platform perspective, our heritage is in send. That's where the company started 8 years ago. And the past 3 years, with the boxes and the drop boxes and the Google Drives and the Sugar Syncs and the share files, we expanded into being able to share across computers with folder sharing and folder security, syncing across multiple devices, and then e-signature across all those as well. This isn't going to work over here. We rebranded this year, and part of our choice in choosing both a content management system and a web content management tool was in anticipation of that rebranding as well as international launch. So what were the challenges? First of all, we had to have marketing control of content. Seems obvious, but the company started as an engineering company, and everything was done in engineering. Changing the homepage, doing a press release, went through engineering. Took sometimes days. Most of the time, it took a couple weeks. Engineering, however, had to control the delivery, and I'll talk about why. in a couple slides, but mostly it had to do with performance and making sure that we support all of the different browsers and different devices that we say we support. There's a shift of responsibility. It's one thing to give marketing control, but you have to take responsibility. If you put a wrong word on the home page, if you load a video that won't load on a mobile device, marketing had to take responsibility of that, whereas operations and engineering had that responsibility before. We wanted to simplify the process. A press release required submitting a JIRA ticket, getting it approved, getting the assets designed, having it go to the web designers who would put it together, who would then brief it with marketing, who would approve it for launch, and it was scheduled for the next day. Obviously, when you want to do A/B testing on landing pages every day, you can't have that process. And we wanted to launch internationally, which essentially meant currency and language for us. And lastly, but probably the biggest, was rebrand the company. So we knew about 7 months ahead of time we were going to rebrand the company. So the choice of the tools mattered, even though they didn't matter in the moment. They mattered 5 months later when we had a name and we had 2 months to rebrand and launch. And rebranding is hard. People ask, why did you go from you send it to Hightail? Well, why did Comcast go to Xfinity, Kraft to Mondelez? I mean, you don't say, let's make Mondelez macaroni and cheese for dinner, right? Anderson Consulting, Accenture, I used to drive a Datsun, so Nissan, you don't think about Datsun anymore. The fact is, all of those names mean something to people, but they mean something very specific, and the company wanted to do something different. You send it, it's very specific. We could have changed it to, we share it, you sync it, we sign it. The idea was go to something that had no meaning per se and put the meaning behind it over the next couple of years. Hightail's interesting because you can hightail a file or hightail a folder to somebody. But really, it doesn't have any meaning, and we're trying to redefine that meaning. You'll see our focus is primarily the professional consumer. It's not SMB, it's not enterprise. It's definitely, it's not any one of those, it's any of those where you've got professional content, especially if it's creative content. Large images, architectural documents, legal documents, video files. Anything that you put a lot of brain power and creativity in, which typically results in a large file, is what we tend to deal with. So marketing content, I mentioned it was built into the product, right? Literally, it took engineering to make a page change. The reaction and action times were multiple days and if not weeks. This was the #1 priority. Get marketing content off of our engineering systems and into a web content management framework. In addition, marketing had a laundry list of things they wanted to do once they had the system, which was basically manage and deploy that content to a number of different endpoints. Right? Everything from managing all of the content that they went on for their search engine marketing to landing pages, mobile devices, blogs, support, and so forth. They wanted all of those assets to be managed centrally so they can control the look and control the message to all the endpoints. At the same time, speed is critical. I like this quote that picture's worth 1,000 words, but you use it 3,000 times more memory. We have a server farm of servers, multiple locations around the world, that serve up pages and serve up documents very quickly. We couldn't launch a system that had content, marketing content, that was slower than that. Right? Marketing content appears within the product as well. So we had to be able to deliver just as fast. So to that end, we needed to make sure our web content manager had structure. They had a separate process for our engineering servers and our content servers. It was simple. Provided a level of formatting to the marketing folks that was structured. At the same time, gave them flexibility to create different landing pages, different content as they needed. I'll just whip through these. Marketing. So, common stuff. They wanted to edit and turn around content quickly. Multiple times a day if they want. Make changes, roll back those changes. They want to have an audit trail. It was not in our best interest for engineering to control how they deployed. So if they want to do it 3 times a day and the 3rd time was wrong, they could push a button and roll back without ever having to call operations. From an engineering perspective, they wanted to QA all the pages, make sure the languages are correct, make sure all the browsers and OSs that we supported worked. They wanted a final OK, a final 2 eyes, and they wanted to be able to maintain that performance. And the reason some of these things are important is we looked at a very simple approval process, which is create, submit, approve, deploy. 4 eyes, 2 people look at it. This is my favorite quote. I thought I'd get laughs out of this one. Thank you. A bit Hollywoodish, but failure for us wasn't an option because we had very hard dates for rebranding. We had very hard dates for language. And we had to get these infrastructure up and running. So In Hollywood, success is interesting because it comes with drugs, divorce, fornication, bullying, travel, medication, depression, neurosis, and suicide. And failure, you just get failure. I will tell you, we definitely had medication, meditation in most of the project. So the conclusion we came to after looking at CQ5, Crown Peak, SharePoint, Mambo, Joomla, OpenCMS was Alfresco's content management system, Enterprise Edition, Crafter's web content management solution, basically a plugin, an enhancement on top of Alfresco, and SmartLing language translation. And I won't talk much about SmartLing today. So how do we get to those conclusions? Well, I hate saying high value, but it's a high value offering. I mean, open source, you pay for maintenance on the number of servers you have, essentially low cost deployment for us, ease of installation. In our pilot phase, we spun up an Amazon pod, loaded Alfresco, loaded the Crafter software, tested it for 30 days, played with it, checked off all the boxes for all the features that it had, and moved forward. We had a need to deploy to more than one endpoint, meaning we had Usendit, we know we had Hightail coming, we also had a product called Workstream. So we had essentially 2 sites, 1 microsite, and had those in multiple languages. We wanted to manage that all in one place. High capacity delivery, I'll show a Crafter slide that talks about authoring is separate from deployment. So you can author and preview your content separate from multiple servers that are performing extremely well in deploying all that content. Digital asset management is something we're just getting to this year. We have Alfresco in-house. It's used for web content management. We're now expanding its use within the company outside of just that web content management. And I think one of the things that struck us early on, both from Alfresco and the Rivet Logic folks, was that within 1 week we're on the phone with the CTO, the CEO, and having conversations about how we can get moving quickly. So we felt kind of like a medium-sized fish in a medium-sized pond, which I think is much different when you're dealing with a larger organization. You're just yet another license to be sold. This is the basic architecture. So on top of Alfresco, you've got Crafter Studio. There's content managers. We actually split those into 2 types of people. One is marketing folks, content creators who are in editing content. The other are web front-end developers who develop the templates, kind of the fixed format that marketing can use with some level of flexibility in there. That's deployed out to multiple servers, runs the Crafter engine, kind of a partner product, if you will, to the Crafter Studio. Here you have 1 Alfresco license. You manage all of your content with all of the capabilities of Alfresco, but then you publish out to the Crafter engine and allows you to scale that side without incurring the cost of Alfresco licenses, but also has low overhead. It's basically an Apache Tomcat stack. Allows us to use our Java infrastructure and allows us to use our hardware that we already have deployed in a bunch of data centers. More things on Alfresco and Crafter. Well, again, multiple websites. We didn't want a point solution that was specifically designed to manage a single website. We wanted to manage all 3 websites with the different language variations as we needed. We launched initially with Dutch and French. Seems odd, but we tested in Montreal and in the Netherlands. There's very small markets that we could control. And then we just launched Spanish and Italian in October. We wanted the ability to support back-end language integration. I've got a couple of charts on that. We didn't end up doing that because of time. We used a proxy service for language in the front, but we're now looking at tearing that out and integrating the backside with Alfresco and Crafter. This basically just shows that we've got the full stack of Alfresco capabilities, and we can deploy not only to Crafter, but to multiple devices and control the content. We haven't used the social aspect yet, but it's all there. We're beginning to do digital asset management. Per se, we don't do document management or records management, but all those capabilities are already in-house, and should other groups in the organization want to use that, they can. A couple screenshots in here. Pulsar was the name of the Hightail rebrand. Essentially, within the Crafter product, every user gets a dashboard of what they're working on, what's been deployed, what is going to be deployed. You can edit it directly from here, preview it, duplicate it. You work within the Alfresco store, and you can also preview on that machine, so you don't affect all of your actual servers that are out there. It's kind of like running on a development environment from a preview standpoint. And it's convenient because marketing folks and engineers see the same dashboard. So everybody comes in with what I'm working on, what I've got ready to be published out, what's been published. There's kind of two important ways that we use editing the content. One is a more structured approach where you come in, there's very fixed fields. Marketers can't put long strings in. They can't put images that aren't correct in. They can't change style sheets. They can change any of the content on the page. There's also an in-context editing. So if you preview the page, this happens to be a workstream page, you'll see these little pencils sprinkled around the page. If you click on any one of those pencils, you can then edit that section. So from a marketing perspective, they can add more sections, they can add different images, they can't change the style sheet, they can't modify the main menus. They may be able to change the image, but they can't change the corners or the layout of it. So it gives us control over the design, but it gives marketing the flexibility to change the actual content as they see fit. They can also do A/B pages. We use Omniture, which is now Adobe Analytics. It used to be Site Catalyst. We generate all of these Site Catalyst tags behind the scenes. So when a page is deployed, it immediately gets tracked in our analytics. And we generate somewhere over 200 dashboards a day, managing all of our different channels, all of our revenue, all of our sales, not just on the web, but across all our mobile devices using Adobe's analytics system, which is one of the reasons CQ5 was an initial choice. Within the Crafter product, you can also preview. So this shows you basically an iPhone that is rendered within the browser, and it shows you your actual content in the iPhone. You can rotate it, you can look at it in a tablet, and you can choose to edit it. So without publishing and then going to your iPhone and looking at it, you can, right within the tool, preview what your content will look like. We have very simple setups. We've got either web or mobile, so we have basically two designs. It does look different on a mobile device than on the web. You can target devices specifically. You can do it generically. You can use reactive design, which will actually change the layout based on the specific size of the screen. We choose to keep it simple in the beginning. Digital asset management, this is something we're starting to use. In essence, we have 15 folks doing graphic design within the company. They don't use Alfresco yet, but what we've set them up to do is use the digital asset management capabilities of Alfresco, separate from Crafter, separate from the marketing engineering team. They use the repository for versioning, doing all of their development about 4 months out for mobile, desktop, and web. And then we're working with the Rivet Logic folks to automate basically a conversion of certain assets into the web content management system. So that as a logo changes, that will be modified into 6 different sizes and then put into a area of the repository that Crafter can get to. So next time a marketing person goes in, he can choose from those new images. So the first thing is to get them using the repository. The second thing is to automate some of those assets into the web creation. This was one of Russ's slides. I don't know how technical anybody wants to get. Basically, very easy to integrate. We've got Crafter running on top of Alfresco. We've got templates, assets, and XML. It's all maintained. Essentially, Crafter bundles those up and pushes that out to the engine. There's some specifics on using Spring and the configurations out there. Again, it's Java-based. It's very lightweight. Publishing literally takes seconds. We don't have videos per se. And everything is packaged, and you can roll back that package. So if you use an image that's used on other pages and you roll back that page, the image may stay because it belongs in other pages, and the system knows that. Language translation. Now that I'm using the keyboard, I have 3 slides on this. This is what we did. This is the simple solution, and this was the complex one. So essentially what we did is we allowed our vendor to use a proxy solution to translate. This is English and French. It's done on the front end. So you use a client, come in, there's a translation that takes place before you as you hit our servers. The simple solution, which we designed and are starting to implement, is that within Alfresco, we can talk to the translation vendor via API. So as a marketing person comes in and changes stuff in English, it will then get queued up to the vendor who will do a translation that may take time. It may come back in 24 hours, it may come back in 2 hours. When that comes back, there's a notification, the content's loaded back into the authoring system, and then within the system, when you go to the Dutch version of the site, you'll see that content. Very simple workflow, doesn't allow for much approval. You do the approval on the Alfresco side. There's a kind of a next step, which is kind of complicated, but essentially says content can flow in and be approved and rejected. There's different things that can be approved and rejected and different things that happen. So You can choose to publish temporarily. When you come back from the vendor, you can reject and go through an editing process. The main idea is this. If you've got English and you've got everything in English, and you want to launch in Spanish, but you only have half your stuff in Spanish, what will happen here is Crafter will roll back to English when you don't have it. It will know you have a primary and a secondary language. If you then have Portuguese and you want your backup to be Spanish and the backup to that to be English, it also takes care of that. So you can have primary translation, backup translation, secondary translation, have it all managed in a single product. Routing and approval, it said 4 eyes, but I like this quote. If you don't know what to do with many of the papers piled on your desk, stick a dozen colleagues' initials on them, pass them along, when in doubt, route. We took the opposite of this. We actually went down a path of a very complex routing process where we had multiple people looking at it in different groups, and we had caveats for when you're on vacation and who covers for them. And we started looking at using the workflow engine, and we said, this is ridiculous. You're the author. You have to approve it, and you have to say, I'm ready for this to be deployed. And then one other person in a group will then approve that for you. If they reject it, you have to go back and edit it. But the idea is 4-eye principle before anything goes out live to the web. This just goes back to the dashboard where you can see, again, what's in process. You notice along the top there's a menu that floats along with you no matter where you are in the product. It allows you to edit and schedule. You can click things to go live. There are different permission levels. We have 2. You can submit it to go live, or you can make it go live. You're either in one of those 2 buckets. So if someone's on vacation, anybody who's left in that bucket can do the approval. So the results. Basically, everything we wanted, we got. Marketing got control of their content. Engineering got control of delivery. We got the speed improvements. Sometimes marketing deploys 3 or 4 pages a day. A press release they can queue up for 5 a.m. on Monday morning without anybody having to actually be up at 5 o'clock on Monday morning. We've got much faster development times. We made our international launch, which we did 4 months before we rebranded, and we actually rebranded the company with no hiccups, surprisingly, no hiccups. In the end, we also increased the most important thing, which are prospects to leads and customers, the international side especially. From the Hightail perspective, we took, as we knew we would, a slight dip because rebranding is hard, and we actually recovered within about 45 days from that. So for us, it was a complete success story. A couple things we had internally were, you call them product owners, product sponsors. We had actual engineering leads who were responsible for different aspects of this, as well as our CMO. So success is in almost in every field, depends more on energy and drive than it does on intelligence. It explains why we have many stupid leaders. I think the tools we chose fit well. The folks we work with were great. But in the end, it really took us driving forward and making sure we hit dates, and we did that not by force, but by incenting the team to come on board with more powerful tools so they could do more in less time. So some things that we realized was build the platform. Although we use a very small piece of Alfresco, it's now a platform the whole company can use, and we're starting to inch that along. We don't hog the resource, if you will. We kept our stakeholders small. It was basically marketing and engineering. We delivered in increments. We happen to be on agile development, so we deliver every 2 weeks, and we followed that guideline. And we share the infrastructure. So anybody who wants to leverage the Alfresco installation outside of web content management can. Keep it simple. Focus, focus, focus. We did one area at a time. We deployed to marketing first, then allowed the PR folks to use the system, then allowed the product folks to come in and manage the product content, and then allowed support to come in and write case studies. And we did it one at a time, and we allowed them to kind of teach each other, so it was self-service. We kind of then redid all that for international, and then we redid all of that for the rebranding. When I say redid, we started over, but instead of taking 6 months as it did first pass, it took about 2 months to international, and then it took about 30 days to do the rebrand. So by using Alfresco and Crafter, we focused our energies on content and not on deployment. International, there's not much to say in here except don't use a proxy vendor. Use the back-end solution like we intended to do. It's much more robust. And it doesn't get you stuck with one vendor. Lessons learned. Operations is critical. We got slap happy with Amazon. We did everything on Amazon. We did it outside of our operations group. When it came time to deploy, it had to be in our operations group. We use Amazon and AWS, but not for our full stack of products. So we didn't keep them in the loop as much as we could. Change is hard, doesn't sound, I mean, yeah, change is hard. It was for an organization that for 8 years did everything out of one engineering group and now had to let go of responsibility. Control versus responsibility. If you want the control, you've got to take the responsibility. They both come hand in hand. I think it's a Spider-Man line or something, right? Don't design for edge cases. We're an engineering company. We design for edge cases. Everybody designs for edge cases. Don't design for the edge case. Right? It's not critical. You can get to it after the fact. The end. Record time. Record time. Any questions? Anybody have beer? Yes, sir. Oh, men in the back, green shirt. Please stand up. You have to use the microphone. Thank you.
Can you explain a little more detail, like the functions of each of the product, how Alfresco and Crafter work together, and which, what pieces they each do to get to the complete end? And then I have another follow-up question.
Sure, I'll give you one I know, which is there's probably more above my pay grades if you guys want to chime in. So my understanding is Alfresco itself, the core repository with all of the versioning, is leveraged. So all of the image assets, all of the XML, all of the content is actually in a directory structure under web projects. And you can go in and look at each individual file if you want, right? There is master XML kept, there's actually content blobs kept, and all of the images. You can even see on there all the servers they were published to. We typically don't use that interface. We use the Crafter interface, which kind of hides most of that for you. So from a Crafter perspective, you're choosing a website, you're choosing a language, and you're browsing all of the pages in there. If you want to copy a page, you say duplicate it, and you get the same template. There's two sets of content. One is the template themselves. They use FreeMarker, correct? FreeMarker, which is a templating engine, and that's what the web developers use to say, here's the layout of the page, here's where menus go, here's where this content area is, here's where the footer is. Those are then rendered by Crafter, even though they're pulled out of Alfresco, for the user, and you can enter the actual content itself. So it focuses on the workflow for the web development, manages the deployment off to the servers for you, but uses the versioning and core repository of Alfresco under the covers.
Okay. And I can elaborate a little bit more on that. So Alfresco is the content platform. So all of the content on the authoring side is stored and managed in Alfresco. And Crafter Studio is the application that is the primary user interface and has all the user interface features for the web content editors and managers and reviewers. So all those screenshots you saw that Steve was showing are Crafter Studio pages, and they talk to Alfresco through its APIs for putting content in, getting it out, all the versioning, search, workflow, and all the content services. And then the other key part of Crafter is Crafter Engine, which is the content delivery system. So we publish content out from Alfresco using Crafter Studio, the editors do. And then Crafter Engine is Java-based middleware. As Steve said, it runs in Apache Tomcat. It's Spring-based with FreeMarker templating. And that's your actual website application or applications. You can have any number of those. So that's separate from Alfresco entirely. It's just Java-based middleware on top of which you build your website applications.
Okay.
Matter of fact, for our users, with the exception of the Alfresco login that they get, they're actually not using anything in Alfresco.
Yeah, I was just wondering why you went with that interface versus what the Alfresco interface. Was it easier for you? Did you feel like it would be easier for your internal clients to utilize that for your design?
Yeah, well, we don't want to give people that level of access to the content, and we're talking about web content, right? So it's not an actual document. So we don't want people going into the hierarchy and playing with content.
Okay.
So there's a separate level of management above that.
Yep.
But most of the users are marketing users, and so what they want is their page in a form, kind of like Expression Engine or some of these other rendering tools would give you. But that's also very managed, right? So they can roll back, they can schedule to deploy. That's not a feature of Alfresco. Right?
Okay.
Yeah, and in Crafter Studio, it's really tailored for managing web content. So you can create a page, and a page is full of components. A page has a template associated with that. And from the editor's point of view, they're just managing page or content on that page. Underneath, Crafter Studio is taking care of all of the different, underneath the covers, that's a bunch of different content items they go into Alfresco.
So you may change an asset that is in 7 different pages, that those pages have to change, and you don't know that.
Right.
But by changing that asset, Crafter knows that, and the next time you publish your 1 page, actually 7 are going out.
Right.
Same thing with rollback. It knows that you changed 1 page, but it deployed 7, so a rollback actually is greater than you think.
And does Crafter, does it control, I know you said you guys don't do responsive, but is that the piece that you would configure for responsive?
You can use or not use responsive.
We get this question a lot, and you talked about using Adobe Analytics, and that was one reason you were looking at CQ5 originally. Did you run into any, or did we, or you, the team run into any issues with the integration? Do you think there were anything using Crafter that you sacrificed in analytics?
No, I think, so out of the box, there's no integrations. We had to do that work. But let's say it took a man-month to do that. I'm just going to pick a number. That cost is far less than the cost of CQ5 and the 3.5 people we needed to support it and the 4 servers we needed. I mean, it was 1% of the cost of what we would have had to spend for CQ5. So, and instrumenting for Site Catalyst is not a difficult thing. I mean, it's grunge work, right? We wanted to automate it so that when a marketer puts a page name in, that's actually used for some of the taggings and evars that they use in Site Catalyst, but that's hidden to them. So, no, I would say no.
Great.